Hi, guys. Welcome back to another episode for the Ace for Waves podcast with me, Annabelle. We're doing a little something different today. I've done it on the pod before, I've done it on the channel before, but it is March as of recording this, March 28th to be exact. And March Madness has been going on for the past couple of weeks. If you've been keeping up to date with that, March Madness is the NCAA tournament for college basketball where teams get to compete in a tournament with other teams involved. And it's a big deal in the month of March. There's Selection Sunday that was just 2 weeks ago, I believe, to this almost 2 weeks ago as of recording this. We've had the first rounds and the second rounds of the NCAA tournament happen for both the men and for the women. And now we are approaching the Sweet 16, where 16 teams will face off against one another. The winner of each matchup then advances on to the Elite Eight. Then we go to the Final Four. And finally, we have the National Championship, which is the second week of April. So there's still a few more weeks left of college basketball to be played. I figured why not hop on and do an episode kind of talking about some of the stories of the NCAA tournament so far, kind of talking a little bit about the college basketball season, what I can remember from it, but also just keep it like very chill, very low vibes. I do want to do that with some episodes. I don't want to make it seem at all like very, to put it frankly, conversational. I do love talking about certain topics. I do love coming up with kind of an outline for my main talking points and having a certain level of discussion with these kinds of things. But I also just like to keep it chill once in a while. So that's what we're going to do today. And we're going to do that by painting stream. And by a painting stream, I mean me just painting, a fun hobby of mine while I talk college basketball and the March Madness and the NCAA tournament. I did this same exact thing about a year ago last year to the date. So it's just going to be a kind of a repeat of that. But hopefully I can still engage in some sort of conversation just by talking, and you can listen to me ramble. So with that, I have the foundations set up for this. We have the blank sheet of white paper, which is a little bigger than the papers that I've used in the past because I forgot my actual like sketchbook at home. So this is the next best thing. But this paper is also kind of, I shouldn't say harder. It's a little bit thicker and heavier. So it actually might work out better for this case. I have paintbrushes here. They're not a lot, but they are in a variety of brushes. So there's that. And then, of course, we have the wonderful paint palette that I have used before. This is just one. I've used it quite a lot. So some of the paints are kind of running low, but not to worry because I have another like brand new palette here that has not been used. I really just tore off the thing covering it. So it has not been used, it has not been touched. But if I need it for anything, then we'll break this palette out as well. And if you're listening on Spotify by chance, you can't see me actually paint, but you can just hear me talk. But if you're watching on YouTube, then you can kind of see. I'll give a little bit of my painting updates as I move further along. So with that, let's get started. I actually have no idea what I want to paint. So I should have came up with that idea, but we'll figure it out as it progresses. And I forgot how to open the palette and broke that, but that's okay. I'm trying to think what color I should start off with first. Um, I think I'm gonna start off with some blue, actually. Oh, I also have water in here that you can't see right now, but I we're just gonna wing this, guys. Even though I don't know what I'm doing, I'll think of something. So not to fret about that. Let's see how this goes. So for March Madness, since that is the main focal point of today, if you're keeping up with March Madness for both the men and the women, I know fewer about the women's tournament than the men's tournament, unfortunately. I haven't been keeping up too much with women basketball this year, which might sound bad, and I'm sorry. I just don't really watch a lot of women's college basketball. I have watched Iowa State women's basketball. I've watched a few games of theirs. I did watch a few games of their tournament games, and they looked good in the first four. So they didn't start off in the round of 64, unlike other teams when they did like their seeds. There's a round of 64, but then there's also like first four games, and those games are usually between two 16 seeds who face off against one another. So the four 16 seeds in total, and then there's four 11 seeds that face off against one another as well. And whoever's the winner of those gets to move on or advance to the round of 64. So Iowa State women was one of the first four games, and they won that. I believe they played Princeton, if I'm not no, did they play? I know they played Princeton, but now I feel like they played Princeton in the round of 64. So now I'm confused. They might they might have played Michigan in the first round. I honestly forget, and I'm sorry if I'm struggling right now. But I know they did win their first four game. Audie Kurtz had a phenomenal game in there, but Addie Brown and Emily Ryan were also really good. And then they, in the round of 64, they ultimately fell short. I think it was to Michigan, actually. If I'm wrong, let me know. But we watched that. And then for the men's college basketball, I watched a lot more than just a few games. I did watch the Iowa State men play. They are my favorite college basketball team. And the discourse surrounding Iowa State basketball at the beginning of the season was that they were expected to go to the Final Four because of how good they were. And I'd like to echo that statement. Number one, by saying that they were a Final Four caliber team. And I truly believed that at the start of the season. They had two excellent point guards in Taman Lipsey and Keyshawn Gilbert. They had a great forward in Milan Momcilovic, a great forward slash center esque in Deshaun Jackson, then kind of who I dubbed as their X factor, and Joshua Jefferson, who is a forward but could also play the guard position if you asked him to. And they had one of the best 3-point shooters on their team, Curtis Jones, their sixth man who came off the bench and quite frankly averaged more points than some of the other starters in the Big 12. So that's an incredible accomplishment and feat there in itself. He is one of the best guards in he was one of the best guards in the Big 12. And I even go as far as to put him in like one of the top 20 guards in college basketball this season. I don't think that's a far stretch. He was the Big 12 sixth man of the year, and rightfully so. He was excellent. But also, we saw the evolution of Nate Heisey late in the season, too, in which he really came into his own. But at the start of the season, I did believe that they were Final Four caliber. When you have two great point guards, when you have two great forwards, actually three great forwards, and then you got some quality stuff from the guys off the bench. Yeah, I believe that they very well could have gone to the Final Four. But unfortunately, injuries early on in conference play kind of took a big hit. I know Taman was dealing with a shoulder injury at one point and a broken thumb. Keyshawn had a groin injury late in the season, which kind of sidelined him for a couple of games. Um, I don't know if Curtis Jones had to miss a game or not, but I'm pretty sure he did. Milan was out at the beginning of conference play too with an injury. So if this team had managed to stay fully healthy without injury bearing, I I would say that they were, if not Final Four bound, then 100% Elite Eight bound at best or at worst. And I think what we have to also remember is that they only had one loss in non-conference play, and that was to a number one ranked team in the country at one point in time, Auburn. Auburn was really good then, back in November, and they are still good now in March. I'm starting with a green base here. I'm thinking we can maybe make it look like grass, but again, we'll see how this all works out with the paint. But anyways, speaking of I did make a bracket. I only had Iowa State going to the Sweet 16. I didn't have them going very far. So my bracket didn't take too big of a hit when they lost in the round of 32. And I know losing in the round of 32 as a 3 seed could be a disappointment to some, and then a fail of a season in some other people's eyes. I don't look at the season necessarily as a failure per se. I do think that there were some games in which they should have and could have won. But you can say that for almost any team, and not just basketball, but any sports team in general. There's games that you could have and you should have won. Some notable games that come to mind there is the game at Arizona where Caleb Love made a half court shot at the buzzer to send the game into overtime, in which Iowa State ultimately lost. There's one instance that comes to mind. I think against West Virginia as well, if you take away the turnovers that this team committed, and again, being without Momcilovic, that's a game in which they should have won. West Virginia wasn't really that good. Iowa State definitely had the advantage over them, but ultimately that also kind of fell short. At Kansas as well, at I don't think they looked great there. That might have been the worst that they looked on the road, bearing at home against Kansas State. But again, injuries kind of play a factor in there, but every team deals with injuries. So that can't be the reason why you either lose or the reason why the performance just wasn't there. I finished making my grass light stuff. Iowa State did have some good moments though in the season. I will give them that. Going on the road to beat Texas Tech is quite hard to do. So the fact that they won on the road at Texas Tech was a big win in my eyes. Being close, almost beating Houston without Curtis Jones. I think this was without Curtis Jones when they had to play Houston. It was either that or I think they were without Keyshawn as well. So I think they were down a few people there. And almost beating them at Houston too. I saw that as a one in my eyes. But like I said, There's some games that in which they could have and should have won, but ultimately just couldn't close it out. At home against BYU in double overtime is another thing that comes to mind, but that was just a great group game and a very physical game at that, which is what I think we're seeing a lot in college basketball nowadays, especially, is we're seeing more teams get physical and more athletic in their play, which is what any fan should want. That's what you should want to see, and that's what you should expect from college players, especially. You should expect them to be athletic on the court. You should kind of expect a little bit of physicality. It's not going to be all like sunshine and rainbows where you're not going to uh, let people shoot wide open shots, not even attempt to defend them. There has to be some levels of effort there, which is what I saw a lot in Big 12 play, especially. I know the SEC can get very physical at times as well. And even some of the Big 10 schools, too, are not afraid to get a little bit hands on and close, which I which I'm all for it. I know there can be some levels of repercussion there, but I'm all for more physicality. I think it brings an intensity to the game that has been missing for a few years, and it's only going to increase as players enter the basketball world and get coached by these coaches. So that's a little bit of Iowa State basketball. I'll try to move on to a different topic now, so I'm not just talking Cyclones or thing. So Drake was another school that was on my radar for this tournament. And the reason I say that is because they went 30-3 in non-conference and in conference play in the Missouri Valley Conference. 30-3 is, in my eyes, almost impossible to achieve. Now, granted, the Missouri Valley Conference is not the Big Ten Conference. It's not the SEC. It's not the ACC. It's not the Big 12. It's not the Mountain West. Compared to all these other major conferences, they are like a middle tier or very high on the lower tier. They're not a conference in which you're going to see schools competing in all these national championships and national tournaments. And that might make me a bad person to say that, but unfortunately, it's just reality. So if I'm crushing teams in the Missouri Valley Conference, I'm sorry, but it's kind of true to a degree, right? When you win your conference tournament, you automatically get a bid in the NCAA tournament. Just because you win your conference championship does not automatically mean you're going to get a number one seed. That does go to the teams who had the best overall record and throughout the season, and then it kind of goes on from there. So you can kind of connect the dots as to where this is going. But Drake did end up being an 11 seed, and they had to play Missouri in the first round of the tournament. And I know a lot of people have picked Missouri to win. I think Missouri is great. They were great in the SEC. They have some really good players. I recognize Caleb Grill, who did play basketball at Iowa State for a while before transferring to Missouri. He was a standout player for their team. I believe he was also their sixth man and won SEC sixth man of the year. So much like Curtis Jones, those two sixth man players ended up being some of the best players on their basketball teams. And I was really happy to see that. Caleb Grill deserves it. I know that he had a little bit of a falling out at his time with Iowa State. So seeing him kind of flourish at Missouri and getting the love and the recognition for his skills there was really heartwarming to see. But I did end up picking Drake to win in the first round. And I just had the feeling that Drake was going to come out and knock off a very good Missouri team. And my hunch was right. Drake did end up winning that game. And I honestly wasn't surprised because even though Missouri is very physical and they were in a very good conference, I mentioned before, the SEC is one of the top conferences in the nation at the moment. But just think of a Missouri Valley Conference team in Drake. Just because you go 30-3 doesn't mean that you have necessarily beaten good schools. It doesn't mean that you are the best in the nation. I don't believe Drake was even ranked in the AP top 25 all season, but just because they were unranked doesn't mean that they were also not good. They were very good. And I think Ben McCollum was a top 10 coach last season. That might be a bit of a hot take, but what he's done at Drake, getting Drake to 30 wins and only 3 losses, and securing them a bid in the NCAA tournament and beating 6 seed Missouri is remarkable. And I know now that he's heading off to Iowa to become their next head coach. So we'll see what happens there. I think he's going to be a good coach at Iowa. I'm not a Hawkeye fan. I'm not trying to say that just to say it. But I do believe that Ben McCollum will do good things over at Iowa and bring his good coaching experience and bring a new presence to that university and to that athletic program. So I am excited to see what he does there. Other stories in the NCAA tournament so far. I did pick Alabama to win the whole thing. And the moment I submitted my bracket, I regretted it. Now, Alabama is still in the mix for a national championship. They haven't been eliminated yet. But the more I watch these teams, I don't think Alabama is winning the whole thing. And that's just the reality that I have come to. Even though Alabama is good, you still can't you can't disregard Duke. Duke is looking like a national champion caliber team at the moment, and they're playing national championship worthy basketball. You can't leave out Florida, which some of my family members did pick Georgia, did pick Florida to win the whole thing, which also doesn't seem like that much of a stretch. One of my brothers has Texas Tech winning the whole thing. I was going to go with a Big 12 school. Earlier this year, I made a prediction that I thought a Big 12 team might win the national championship. And I had money on Houston doing that. Houston's still in the mix, but I don't know if they can make it past the Final Four now. But we'll see. I was originally going to say Kansas, but the more I watched KU basketball this season, the more I realized that I don't know what went wrong with that team, but they looked out of it and they did not look good. In fact, they were the only Big 12 team to lose in the first round of the tournament. And I did not think that was going to happen from Kansas, especially. I did have Kansas going to my Sweet 16. Why I chose them going that far, I don't know what I was thinking. I guess I just had some hope that they would do good things in March. And unfortunately, they couldn't help out my bracket there. So Texas Tech is still in the running. Um, I believe my mom picked Auburn to win the whole thing. And like I said, the SEC is a great conference. So Auburn winning would do, I think Auburn winning would be great, a good look for the SEC. Usually, a lot of the times we see the ACC teams winning the whole thing, or we see the Big Ten teams more or less. Kansas won for the Big 12, but that was a while ago. Baylor actually won a national championship, I believe, a few years back. So there's always different teams in the mix. I'm trying to decide who I think is going to win. I feel like I just can't leave out Alabama, even though right now I believe that they're not going to win anymore. I'm still going to leave them in. They because they do have potential. If they played their best game and they don't turn the ball over as much, they make all their shots that they need to make, and they hold their opponents to percentages that are below the average for the season, then they still have a shot. So I'm not going to rule them out. I do think they can make the Final Four and quite possibly the national championship. I just don't know if they're going to win the whole thing. I think Duke is not a bad guess, not right now either. With Cooper Flag on the team, they're looking unstoppable. So I'll throw Duke in there. I don't know if Duke and Alabama are in the same region. So uh we'll just go with that there. As for the Big 12, I honestly believe that Texas Tech is the Big 12's best bet for making it the farthest. That's not me saying that they're going to win the whole thing by any means. I just think that they are the team that's going to go the farthest in the tournament. And no disrespect to Houston, no disrespect to BYU, who's in the Sweet 16 at the moment. I forget if there's any other teams who made it there. I think no Baylor lost in the second round, I believe. I know they won the first round, but they lost in the second round. But who knows? Is there any other team I'm disregarding? I said BYU already. BYU, Texas Tech, um, Houston. That might be the only three teams left in there. I want to say that Baylor did lose in the second round. Iowa State lost in the second round. Kansas lost in the first round. So what do we have? I have Alabama, Duke, Texas Tech, and then honestly, it's a toss up for me between Auburn and Florida at the moment. But I think I'm going to go with the number one team in the country once upon a time and say Auburn as well. Those are my top four teams in the tournament. And I would just throw Duke and Florida in as the two overall best for facing off. Here, I'll show you what I have so far. It's a little bit like this. So we just have green and blue. We have a sky and we have some grass. I'll figure out what we're going to do with this later on. But we'll kind of I'll finish up some of my blue and let this dry and then come back to it in a moment. So what my bracket looks like now. I was doing really good in the first round of the tournament, and then in the second round, I made some picks that I probably should not have made. So now my bracket's kind of taking a bit of a hit, but it's all good. We're all good there. I did have Iowa State going to the Sweet 16, and they lost in the round of 32. So there was a loss that I got wrong. I did have Kansas going to the Sweet 16, and why I did that again, I don't know what I was thinking necessarily. In fact, Baylor was the only, was it Baylor? No, it's I had Baylor winning. Or did I choose Oklahoma now? I forget. I do know that I had at least one Big 12 team losing the first round, and it wasn't the correct call, obviously, at this stage as where we are in the tournament right now. I want to say I had Baylor losing to Oklahoma in the first round. I think that's the team that I ultimately picked to lose. And do I regret it? Kind of. Yes, I do. I wish I had gone with Kansas, but I think hopefully they'll be back better next year. The Big 12 next year, though, I don't know what that's going to look like because West Virginia got a new head coach now. Iowa State's had quite a few players leave and enter the transfer portal, which makes sense. And I don't fault players for entering the transfer portal, especially when you don't get quality minutes or quality playing time. You want to play basketball. That's what you went to college for, is to do the athletic sport that you chose to pursue after high school. And when you don't get the playing time, when you don't get the minutes that you think that you should have gotten, I get it. Like I said, I don't really fault players for entering the portal. They want to do what's best for them and they want to find a program that fits their needs. So Iowa State did lose a few players to the portal. I know Demarion Watson entered, Nogis entered the portal. Deshaun Jackson, who was a transfer last year, entered the portal again as well. JT Roth entered the transfer portal too. So I hope that they can find schools that are best for them and that they'll be happy at. But Iowa State did get a good player. I saw a text from my brother saying that they got a pretty good. I believe he's a forward. He was from Purdue Fort Wayne. I'm butchering his name right now. I forgot what his name was, and I'm sorry. But you could honestly just look up Purdue Fort Wayne basketball players, and uh, best case scenario is that he'll show up as one of the first three names on that Google search. I could honestly Google it too right now, which is what I think I'm going to do quickly because now it's gonna bother me. Um, we're gonna search Iowa State men's basketball player players. Iowa State got Caden Fish entered the portal as well. I don't know if I said his name already or not. I don't think I did. So Purdue Fort Wayne men's basketball. That's probably easier for me to type in rather than trying to look it up. I've set the click here. Eric Mulder is his name. So Eric Mulder, the transfer from Purdue Fort Wayne, is coming to Ames, Iowa. And he is an Iowa native, so he's going to fit right in at home. That's the only notable name that I've heard Iowa State get in the portal. Again, I don't know too much about the algorithm of like the transfer portal. I don't know much about the algorithm of the college basketball world when it comes to its schools and its athletic programs. I'm not well versed in that information. I could do some research about it and once I gather enough research and educate myself enough about that topic, maybe do a podcast episode about that. But right now, I have little to no information, and I don't want to spread misinformation about that. So I'm just going to keep it very brief and very vague. However, I think that I think this year, especially once March Madness comes to an end, once the NCAA tournament is over, we are going to see more players enter the transfer portal than ever. And again, that's not really a knock on the colleges per se, but it's like what I talked about before with some of the Iowa State basketball players. You do go to school to do your intended sport. It's what you chose to pursue again after high school. You chose to go to college and you chose to do athletics there, and you want to actually play your uh, sport. And there's nothing wrong with wanting more from that. If you're not playing, if you're not getting play minutes, if you're not getting playing time, if you feel like you had a good experience there, but you want something higher that might challenge yourself or push you to new heights, it's not um necessarily a bad thing to want more. So I don't I don't fault players for leaving. If you're leaving on bad terms, that's kind of a different story. But and sometimes schools land transfers that just shape an entire school season. I would venture as far as to say that that's been kind of the story of Iowa State basketball in the past 3 or 4 years since entering the TJ Otzelberger era, is that these transfers are making a big impact on Iowa State. Keyshawn Gilbert was a transfer last season, and he's done some wonderful things for Cyclone basketball. He has emerged as one of the best players on their team. I'd argue a top three basketball player for the Cyclones. Curtis Jones too was a transfer, and we saw that the season he had this year, he was there with them last season too, but this year he really came into his own and he really found his footing. Joshua Jefferson made a big impact, a transfer from St. Mary's, came to Iowa State. Not only gave Iowa State good minutes, but again, going back to that X factor point, he could almost do everything. He could score, he could get rebounds, he could get assists, he could grab steals. He was vital in almost every single aspect where you needed him to be vital in. Foul trouble was a little bit of a concern, especially towards the latter part of the season. We did see him start to get into foul trouble some, and he does love to be aggressive, which sometimes the refs aren't always in your favor with there. But he made a big impact on for the Cyclones. Deshaun Jackson, too, even though he entered the portal after the end of the season, he was still important to the team. He was a big man, but he could also grab rebounds and could defend. And which brings me actually to Nate Heisey. Now, Nate Heisey is a bit of a unique story for the Iowa State season. And the reason I say he's a unique story is he is a transfer from the college where I'm attending at right now, the University of Northern Iowa. He is a UNI transferred over to Ames. And the reason he said that he went to Ames specifically, which I believe I saw in an interview, was that he came to the Cyclones because he wanted to win in March. Now, is that kind of petty on his behalf, kind of insinuating that you and I would never make the NCAA tournament. Sure, but again, he's not wrong. UNI is not Iowa State caliber basketball. They're not Iowa basketball. They're not Duke caliber basketball. And they're not even Drake caliber basketball. So I don't fault him for wanting to go to a school that has a legitimate shot at making the NCAA tournament. But Heisey at the beginning of the season wasn't good. And for a lot of Cyclone fans, I think they would agree as well, is that he wasn't really good at the start of the season. He just needed time to develop. He needed time to find his footing, find his the mentality, kind of just find himself as a whole. And once that clicked, once he started uh working on the athleticism and working on actually making some efforts out on the court, it was like he was a completely different person from the beginning of non-conference play towards midway through conference play. February is where we really saw the peak of Nate Heisey, and suddenly he was one of the top 5 players on the court whenever he played. Top my he was a top 2 defensive player for the Cyclones. And I say top 2, take that as you may. You might even say he was their top defender. Because he was physical, he was athletic, he knew how to rebound. In fact, I think he was top 4, top 5 in rebounders on the team, but he was getting up there. He was defending. He wasn't necessarily letting players off the hook. He was up there right in their face, and he was ready to defend. I saw effort from him that I hadn't seen in non-conference play. I saw more grit. I saw more determination, and that paid off. He made it into the starting lineup once Keyshawn went out with his groin injury. And he was able to give Iowa State quality minutes coming off the bench whenever he came off, and quality minutes as a starter. So I would say Nate Heisey was very vital to Iowa State basketball, along with the other transfers. Even if it took him a little while to find it, he did find it with his team. And he is coming back again for his last year of eligibility, coming back to Iowa State. So I'm excited to see how he grows and how he can get better from the end of last season to the beginning of next season. I'll show you again. I'll give another painting update here. I'm just letting this dry. I think I might either make this into kind of like a playground. I do have a playground up on my, I was about to say shelf, but it's not shelf. I have it on top on my closet doors there. So we might be able to make a playground, or maybe like a little garden here. I would show you it, but I don't want to move my camera while it's charging. So playground or garden, I think, is what we're going to finish out this drawing with. And it's still a little wet, so I do want to let it dry out some more. But I believe with that, I might just conclude this episode. Thank you guys for listening. Just listening to me ramble, talked about Iowa State, talked a little bit about the NCAA tournament in March Madness. Thank you for watching. If you're watching on YouTube, I know I didn't paint necessarily a lot, but once I finish the actual completed drawing, maybe I'll make that the thumbnail of this video so you can see the final piece whenever this does get uploaded. So, I did want to talk about future episodes quickly before I conclude. I have no idea how long I've been talking for at this moment. I don't necessarily have a timer going, but I would guess it's probably close to about 30 minutes at this point. So I'll make this very quickly too. I don't want this to be too long of an episode. I was trying to go for like chill and relaxing vibes. But some future episode topics here that I have planned. This was something that I was planning on doing. I was going to do it last week, but things got busy with school and homework and work and stuff. So I had to push it back by a week. But this was something that I had planned. I do have some main episodes that I plan to release in the coming weeks. I'm writing out content for that, trying to write out some outlines so I have good talking points to talk through. I will have a guest for my next episode, which I believe will be published either Saturday or Sunday. I'm going to film that this weekend. That episode is going to be all about sports media and the algorithm, or not the algorithm, but the oversaturation the media has caused for organizations and for teams. I think that's going to be a fun and unique talk with my special guest that I have coming in to film with me there. I am planning on releasing a video about media bias in sports. That's been a main episode in the works for months now. I just haven't finished the outline for that, so I'm going to do that, record that. There might be another Saturday special coming up. I have been wanting to do one, but I haven't figured out exactly what I want to talk about there. I don't think it's going to be necessarily about sports. I'm going to save that for the main episodes. I know I'm due for another coffee talk soon, so that'll probably come up within the next few weeks, give or take. And I do have a video about butts coming up. That's not going to be a episode. That might just be a video that I post on the channel that I've been wanting to talk about for a while now too. I love to read, and I think I have some good things to say about the topic of butts, but more specifically, the most banned butts in America. So you can keep an eye out for that in the future as well. Other than that, I think that's pretty much all the ideas I have for videos in the future. I probably won't be consistent uploading. Again, I'm nearing the end of school and finals, even though finals are not for another month and a half. I'm still putting all my attention into school and studies, which is the number one priority. Then it's work, then it's extracurricular activities, and then it's this kind of side hobby of mine. So I have other stuff that needs my attention and my direct focus before I do any of this. So I'll try to be a little bit more consistent, but I would just say don't expect a ton of consistency from me at this moment in time right now. And I hope you guys can understand that. But anyways, I'm done talking now. I kind of rambled at the end there. So once again, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And I'll catch you guys on the next video. Bye.